pursuit of freedom, boldly telling the truth in a time of universal deceit.
My guest is Trevor Loudon, political researcher from Christchurch, New Zealand, author of Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. Mr. Loudon, thank you for being a guest on Pursuit of Freedom.
Hi, look, it's great to be there. Thanks very much for having me on.
Could you tell us a bit about your work as a political researcher?
Yeah, look, I've been based out in New Zealand. I've been blogging and writing on the American political scene for about 5 or 6 years. And while I was doing a lot of my background is researching the hard left, the communist groups, Marxist groups, terrorist groups, etc. And while I was researching the American Communist Party in the mid-2000s, in 2007 I came across the connection between a Hawaiian communist called Frank Marshall Davis, a very prominent communist from that era, and his connection to a young teenage Barack Obama. And I found out that he was a mentor to Mr. Obama. So I investigated Obama extensively from that point, and because I knew the networks, I was able to establish his links, heavy links to the Communist Party USA, other Marxist groups like Democratic Socialists of America, the Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism, etc., and built up a big dossier on his communist and Marxist connections. And that culminated in the book that you have there, that you were talking about before, Barack Obama and the Enemies Within.
From what I've read about your research, your focus is on the Marxist infiltration into American government and culture. What is your assessment of the level of that infiltration?
Well, it's dominant. It's dominant. See, really, this has been going on for 100 years, but it really got underway around the Vietnam War era, when a whole generation of young people were radicalized. Now, they didn't have their revolution then, they failed, but while everybody else was getting rich and happy and fat and lazy through the Reagan and Bush years, these people were burrowing into the labor unions, the Democratic Party, the universities, the teachers' colleges, the journalism schools, and they became the dominant part. They became a dominant part of the American culture. Hollywood was obviously another one. And so they've been able to write the narrative for America, and they now run things. So sadly, those old 60s radicals and their proteges are the dominant class in America today.
From my own research, I've come to the conclusion that your assessment is very accurate, and there seems to be far more acceptance of socialism in America now. It's more out in the open than it's ever been before. A few years back, Newsweek declared we're all socialists now on the cover of their publication. Gone is the effort to be covert about their agenda. Is this because they are confident of winning?
Well, that's right. They've so dominated the media. They've so controlled the labor unions, the education system, that they've indoctrinated a whole generation of young kids who now don't understand that communism is a bad thing. They don't understand what socialism is about. They just think that they're being progressive and rebelling against the horrible capitalism of their ancestors that enslaved black Americans and exploited the third world. That's the mindset of so many of them now. So yeah, they are so dominant now that they're getting cocky, and they'll show their hand much more. And the people who grew up in the old America, who understood that communism was bad, who talked to people who had fled Eastern Europe and knew all about Pol Pot and Stalin and Mao Zedong, they're not the dominant people anymore. The young people don't have any background in any of that. They just get told about Che Guevara and Fidel Castro and what heroic liberators they were, and how Malcolm X was a great man and all this kind of thing. So their heroes are entirely different, and their cultural mindset is entirely different. And these are the people who are now going to be leading America into the future.
The infiltration of Marxist ideology is very dominant in the media, as you pointed out, and it's widely accepted that it's dominant in the Democratic Party. I'm an independent now, but I spent nearly 20 years as an activist in the Republican Party. I was very alarmed at the level of acceptance of many socialist concepts, even within what is supposed to be a party opposed to big government socialism. How serious is that problem in the Republican Party in your estimation?
Yeah, look, it's been going on for a long time too, and there was a time in the 50s and 60s where communists, particularly black communists, used to infiltrate the Republicans almost as heavily as they did the Democrats. But that sort of waned later. Now the Republicans, they're split. You know, there's more real conservatives in the Republican Party than there have been for a long time. But that progressive wing, that the old Rockefeller Republicans and the leftist Republicans of the 60s and 70s are still in there, still holding some of the reins of power. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of Republican legislators around the country who will vote for Agenda 21. You know, they believe in environmental, you know, in Marxist, you know, the Marxist myths promoted by the environmental movement. They believe in global warming. They believe in a lot of the Marxist myths that have permeated the culture. So they're not hardcore Marxists like now run the Democrat Party, but they're soft progressives. They go along with most of the ideas. And there are still some pretty hardcore radical leftists in the Republican Party. Dick Lugar was one of them, the senator from Indiana who was thankfully kicked out in the last election. But he's not the only one. You know, Olympia Snow and Susan Collins and people like that. You know, they're all of that ilk, and they're still there, and some of them also in some locations at lower levels, you get Democrats actually consciously infiltrating the Republican Party because that's the only way they can get elected in certain districts. So the Republican Party is certainly not clean, but I'm not one who advocates the idea that the Republicans are as bad as the Democrats, because that is just not true.
I agree the Republican Party does not promote Marxist concepts on the same level as the Democratic Party. In my experience as an activist, you see much greater differences on the local level between the Democrats and the Republicans than on the national level. And it's that disconnect between the Republican National Committee and the state and local Republicans that is causing a civil war in the party.
Yeah, well, I'll just say that my hope is that there is a civil war in the Republican Party. There are more good conservatives and patriots in the Republican Party than there have been for decades. And if the Tea Party element and the real conservatives can win and get rid of the rhinos and the progressives and the losers and the appeasers and the weak-kneed, jelly-spined people who have run the party for decades, there is some hope for America. But you know, so now is the time for patriots to take over the conquest of the GOP, in my opinion.
There are signs of serious reform efforts underway. The Ron Paul Republicans have actually been successful in taking over a number of state parties, Iowa, for example.
Yeah, and you've got Ted Cruz in Texas, you've got Mike Lee out in Utah, you've got quite a few real good guys, and obviously people like Michelle Bachmann, etc. Those are the principled leaders of the future, and they need to be nurtured and supported, and not be screwed over like Alan West was by the GOP hierarchy.
There are many battles going on in the Republican Party. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I wanted to talk about the organizations outside the political parties that are promoting socialism. Some of these are rather deceptive, so identify them as important. What are some of the major ones freedom-loving people should be aware of?
Sure. Well, there are many, but you can't go past the old Communist Party USA. That's still very active, and it's still very, very influential in the labor unions and inside the Democratic Party. There's a lot of Democratic congressmen that are very close to the Communist Party, like Barbara Lee, and Dennis Kucinich was another one, Rosa DeLauro, Lynn Walsey, Raul Grijalva. They are all very close to John Conyers, Danny Davis. They're all very close to the Communist Party. The other one is Democratic Socialists of America, which is actually your country's biggest Marxist organization, and they have heavily infiltrated the Democrat Party. They have infiltrated it at every level, right across the board, and despite their name, they are a hardcore Marxist group, and they are connected very closely to the Institute for Policy Studies, which is out of Washington, D.C. That's the most dangerous left-wing radical non-profit in the country. They've got long-time connections to the KGB, to Cuban intelligence, etc., and they're basically the ideas factory for the Obama administration. And then, of course, there are a whole bunch of offshoots of those, like the Center for American Progress, which is very heavily involved. And then you've got the Soros organizations like the Open Society Institute, which is basically promoting Marxist ideas right throughout America and right through the Democrat Party. So, you know, this is a pretty broad thing. And then you've got the propaganda outlets like Al Jazeera and Russia Today, which is basically an arm of the old Soviet KGB, and that's promoting all sorts of left-wing ideas throughout America every day. So this is a pretty broad church. This is pretty extensive.
Marxists are the master at reinventing themselves. You rarely hear the term communist used. It's really outdated. First they were progressives 100 years ago, then liberals, now back to progressives because liberal has fallen out of favor. They play the name game to confuse people. Are progressives still the dominant socialist, or are there some new branding in the horizon?
Well, the progressive is a broad word, just like liberal was a very broad word. That's gone out of fashion now because it was so badly discredited. But progressive, in Marxist terms, means one who supports the progress of socialism onto communism. That is what progressive means, someone who supports the idea that society will progress towards a communist state. Now, all the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Workers' World Party, all of those people call themselves progressives. So every communist is a progressive, but every progressive is not a communist. It goes much broader than that. There's a lot of Republicans who could fairly be called progressives. It's someone who believes that the state should be basically the guiding influence in society, and that we're moving towards an egalitarian, socialist, eventually communist state. Now that can encompass people in the Republican Party. It can encompasses most of the environmental movement, all of the labor union movement, most of the universities and academia in your country, most of Hollywood, chunks of the Republican Party, all of the Democrat Party, all of the Green Party, all of the Working Families Party. It goes on and on. The progressive movement is a huge chunk of America, but not all the progressives are communists, but effectively they are all working towards a communist future.
What concerns me more than anything is there are so many people who would not call themselves a communist or even a progressive, yet they are unaware they are helping bring about a communist revolution. It's so widespread, and it's in every important institution.
It is very wide, but it's not actually that deep, and that's one thing that most Americans still support decent American values and are patriotic and believe in the Constitution. These organizations are very widespread, but they're not very deep. They're not really rooted in the American culture, but they can still dominate and basically bully and boss people around, But I will say that and this is the key thing, any Republican state legislator who votes for sustainable land use or Agenda 21 or any of these sort of things is basically supporting communism. And they'd swear black and blue that they're not, but unfortunately that is the case. And so it's a widespread socialist culture that so many people have bought into to some degree, at least as a veneer. And this is what political correctness is. People go along with these things. Political correctness is just cultural Marxism. And people go along with it and pay lip service to it because the price of standing up to it is too high. You'll get yourself shouted down, you'll get yourself pilloried in the media if you stand against it. And people just go along to get along. That's why the socialists win. That's why the communists win.
One human trait I see being exploited quite successfully is using peer pressure to keep people silent.
Yeah.
People often worry so much about what others think about them, they won't speak out boldly in times where that's really needed. I think part of the problem is many people just don't have the knowledge to defend their philosophy effectively. Can you recommend where people can get information and better prepare themselves to defend freedom?
Look, I think one of the very best and most simplest well, there's two. I'll recommend my own book for a start, but one of the best resources out there is a movie called Agenda: Grinding America Down. It's a video. It's 2 hours long. It is a history of the internal destruction of America by the cultural Marxists. And it lays out political correctness, the indoctrination of in the schools, in religion, in the environmental movement. It's got some very good speakers, very good experts involved. I'm interviewed a few times in it. There's hundreds of thousands of copies gone out there, and that is the best introduction for anybody who wants to understand what's happening in America today. And we all learn visually far more than reading books these days. So it's something you can sit down, order it online, Agenda: Grinding America Down. It's about $10 or $15 a copy. You can have a party in your own house and show it to your friends. It's an absolutely amazing watch.
I would imagine your website has a lot of information that would be helpful as well, and certainly your book.
My book is Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. It's 700 pages documenting Obama's communist ties. It's the most comprehensive view of Obama out there. And that's available online through Pacific Freedom Foundation, the website Pacific as in the ocean, freedom as in what we all want, foundation. Go there and order it. I have two websites. I have trevorloudon.com, which is my daily blog, and that has a lot of good stuff on it. But I also have another website called KeyWiki, Keywiki. It's a Wikipedia of the United States left, and there's 64,000 files on there profiling radicals, congressmen, senators, presidents, environmentalists, anarchists, you name it. There's virtually every major left-wing organization and individual in the United States is profiled on that site. And it works very simply, just like Wikipedia does.
I noticed KeyWiki on your site. It looked interesting. Is that something you started recently?
No, that's been going about 3 years now, and I've built it up myself and with a lot of help from people around the States. There's a lot of information on there that's archival, that's been dug up from university libraries and that sort of thing. A lot of graphic material. If you want to know the communist connections of your local congressman, you can go, if you're in Arizona, you can go to Raul Grijalva's page or Kirsten Sinema's page. If you're in Connecticut, you can look up Rosa DeLauro. If you're in Michigan, you can go to Hanson Clark or John Conyers. And it's got chapter and verse on their communist and socialist ties. The Congressman Alan West, he was a congressman up until last year in Florida, said there was 80 communists in Congress. He was a bit loose in his terminology. There'd be, they're not card-carrying members of the Communist Party by and large, but there are way more than 80 pro-communist sympathizers in Congress and your Senate. Way, way more than that, and most of them are profiled on KeyWiki.
This is great that you've developed all these tools for getting information out. It's such an important battle. As Reagan said, America's humanity's best hope for freedom. If we fall, there's nowhere else to run.
Well, that's my argument. People ask me why I should care about the politics of the United States. And well, Ronald Reagan was right. Your country is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom fails in the United States, there is nowhere to run. Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, all of those countries will carve up the planet amongst themselves if America goes down. And that's what they're planning to do. And so really the battle to save America is the battle to save Western civilization. So you're right, it's critically important.
I really wish more Americans understood just how dangerous socialism is. It's not an enlightened ideology. It fails miserably in every country that has allowed it to dominate. It seems that it takes freedom-loving patriots like you from another country to remind Americans what is at stake.
It is, and it's not just Americans, but, you know, look, there are more. I've spoken to over 150 audiences in the United States, all over, and the resurgence of patriots and people who care about the Constitution and people who understand American exceptionalism has never been greater. You know, so there's a real battle now between the good guys who are better than they have been for a long time and the bad guys who are worse than they've ever been. So there's a real polarization happening, and whoever wins that battle wins the world. You know, and I want to help make the good guys win, because we all have, you know, we all depend on America being free, America being strong, and America maintaining its world leadership.
I agree, and if Americans in large enough numbers don't stop the federal government's tyrannical efforts to completely destroy the Constitution, the unthinkable would be possible. America would become a threat to the world instead of being a beacon of freedom. And that's why I fully intend to keep up the good fight, and I'm glad that we have allies around the world doing it as well.
Great. Well, I'm pleased you are, because the more people who work on this, the better chance we have. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing this important information to the Pursuit of Freedom listeners.
No, pleasure. Anytime.
The Pursuit of Freedom, the show for people ready to take back their republic.